This was the worst mass shooting that New Zealand had ever seen. A gunman attacked 2 mosques, killing 50 people. The shooter was armed with a semi-automatic rifle, the AR-15. He'd replaced the standard magazine that holds 5 bullets with a high-capacity magazine, allowing him to fire 30 times without having to reload. He had a standard gun license, and his weapons were legally purchased in New Zealand.
Our gun laws will change.
The Prime Minister responded by announcing sweeping changes to the country's gun laws, banning military-style semi-automatic guns and shotguns that can hold more than 5 rounds. And they also introduced a scheme to buy back those existing weapons from gun owners. But will those measures actually work? Can changes in gun policy really reduce the number of gun deaths?
I would expect there to be changes in the gun-related fatalities and injuries there as well.
Sandro Galea is an epidemiologist and a former emergency room doctor. A few years ago, he and his colleagues conducted the first international study of gun policy. They reviewed the findings from 130 other studies dating back to 1950.
The studies were from 10 mostly developed countries, including, of course, the United States. Conversations about gun policy are so often dominated by the gun-loving American example. But these researchers found that several other countries have been quietly leading the way in the fight against gun violence.
One of the most remarkable examples can be found down under.
I walked inside, and that's when all the gunshots started going off.
Australia's Port Arthur massacre in 1996 saw 35 people killed by a gunman armed with semi-automatic weapons. The country responded by enacting some of the most comprehensive firearm laws in the world. They started by buying back around 700,000 firearms. They banned civilian ownership of semi-automatic rifles and shotguns. All legal guns now need to be registered, and gun owners need to undergo thorough background checks. In the 7 years after the laws passed, the firearm homicide rate dropped by more than 40%.
Once you implement multiple laws, you might see a stronger effect because you're trying to reduce or prevent violence from occurring from different angles.
South Africa is a similar story. In 2000, it banned powerful weapons, implemented a background check system, and required gun owners to have permits and licenses. One study found that gun deaths in 5 major South African cities decreased by nearly 14% per year for the next 5 years. And in Austria, a 1997 gun law introduced background checks, limited access to powerful firearms, and imposed rules about how gun owners had to store their guns. According to one study, gun homicides went down by 4.8%.
When you look carefully at cross-country policies, you find that the countries where they either have fewer guns or there is a system of controls about who can access guns, simply have fewer gun-related injuries and gun-related deaths.
Canada has adopted many of those policies. Gun owners need a license and must undergo extensive background checks. But those policies have proved less effective here.
If you take the United States out of the equation, we have the highest homicide rate of any G7 country. And the shootings in Canada have been going up more in the last few years.
This criminologist says Canada's gun problem is unique, in part because of our shared border with the United States and handguns smuggled into the country.
The United States has about 4% of the world's population and nearly 50% of the world's handguns.
He says Canada would be wise to look to Scotland. Glasgow was once the murder capital of Europe, but its homicide rate was cut in half after investing in social programs like those that work with at-risk youth.
We need a different approach. That approach is well proven, and I think we need to stop having fights about gun legislation and start having fights about effective programs and investing in effective programs that actually work.
As a result of each country's unique geography and culture, there is no one silver bullet policy to reduce gun violence. But the researchers found that those countries that implemented a combination of different policy parts have almost always hit their targets and saved lives.